One of the most fun parts of the wargaming hobby is really letting your creativity run wild and taking kits, playing around with them and seeing what you can do with them. In this video we're going to be showing you one idea for doing this by taking some Warhammer 40,000 industrial scenery, rearranging it a little bit and using it to create a locomotive. Now the reason why I did this in the first place is because there's a film I like called Enemy at the Gates, where at the end of it you get two snipers having a duel in an old abandoned rail yard in the middle of Stalingrad. It's a really amazing scene in the film and it's really atmospheric too, and it's something that I've always wanted to bring to the battlefield in some scenery and really playing games on it. Doing a locomotive and rolling stock has been a large part of doing this, and so when the idea struck it was just something really fun to do, and perhaps in watching this video where we show you how I did this it'll give you some inspiration as well. Anyway, we'll see you at the desk. To build your locomotive, the first thing to do is to get together all the various bits and pieces that you're going to need. And so first of all, we'll go through the various kits that we're going to use. To start out with, what we need for the real core of this is one of the Sector Mechanicus scenery kits called a Galvanic Magnevent, because this contains all the frames that you need. However, these frames do appear in lots of different kits in this range, so you don't specifically have to have this box, but the four frames that you are going to need are, to begin with, one that's really vitally important, is this one right here. And the reason is because it's got this part on here, which we're going to need quite a lot of, but along with a few of the little bits, but that part is really important. Now after that we're also going to need one for which we're going to be building the footplate of our engine, and for that you want one of these flooring frames. We're going to be using these parts mostly, but also we want the walling pieces as well, as you'll see for later on. Now after that we also have this one here. This is another frame that comes in the Galvanic Magnevent kit, and this one's really useful again because of the walling pieces, which we're going to be using a lot of. But finally, one that's also very important for us is this one, the pillar frame, because what we're going to need is various bits and pieces of the pillars and the ladders and things like that. So those are the four frames we want from the Mechanicus kit. After that, we also want to have something to be the computer control device that's on the back of the engine for the driver to use. Now the easiest one to use, the one that I used, is actually from the Objectives kit. It's this little one just up here, this kind of computer console. But you don't specifically have to have that one if you don't want to. You can really use your imagination here to really do the various different parts on the engine. That one's just a very convenient one to use, but there's loads of computers in 40k, so whatever suits you and whatever you got in the bits box will be perfect. Now the final thing to get hold of is the parts for the wheels, and for this what I'm going to use is some bases. I've got here a 25mm round base, just a standard one. It's kind of one that a Acadian Guardsman might go on, and it's important that it's a closed one as well. Make sure there's no slot in there. In addition, what you'll need is some of these bases for flying stands. This is a 32mm one. We're going to be using this to actually create the wheels for our engine. You see, it's going to glue on there like that. So it's important it's one of these. So that's a little bit larger than that base. So there's actually a bit of a flange there, a bit of a rim. Now you can just use something like a MDF circle for this kind of thing, but you can see these flying stands are actually very useful and a really good shape for it. So very convenient to use. So with all those parts gathered, we can actually start building our engine now, and the starting point is going to be to create the footplate of it. Nice stable base to begin with. So for that, what we need to do is go to the flooring frame, and to create it, what we want to go for is one of these large ones just here, and also one of these single sections just here. And to hold them together, also one of these little things in the center just to give it a little bit of support. So what we're going to do now is cut those out and glue them together. And to glue them, I'm going to be using super glue, but you can of course use plastic glue if you want to. And there we are, the footplate's been assembled, and you can see I've also braced it at the back of it, just there with that little clip. And with that done, we can now start doing the detail that's going to go underneath this, so all the wheels and things. And the first stage for doing that is going to be creating the beams that go on either end of this. Now to do that, we need those pillar pieces, and I've got one of them here. It's this part just here. We need the two that are like this. And actually specifically, what we want is this part up here. What we're going to do is cut that off around about there, so we get a nice neat line using that beam along there as kind of the bracing part there. So we want to cut like that. Now, this is quite thick plastic, it's very chunky, so to cut through something like this, what you're going to need is a modelling saw. And here's mine just here. Goes without saying that this thing's super sharp, so if you're a youngster, you'll want to get an adult to do this part for you. But what we need to do is to just cut that part away, so make sure you've got a cutting mat down first of all, it's nice and stable, so you're really steady with it. And what we're looking to do is to place the saw just in there like that, so underneath that part that we want, just beneath those little dimples there. And then it's just a case of very gently sawing into it like that, just bracing it to get started, and then carrying on all the way through. So I'm going to carry on sawing all the way through this part like this now, and the other part, and when we'll come back, we can add these to the footplate. And here we have the part cut out, and I've also cleaned up the underside of it just there using a file to make sure it's nice and neat. And with that done, we can now glue it onto the footplate. Now I want to be on the front and back, just going on these areas just here, so that once it's glued on, you can see one of those hexes still visible on either end. So I'm going to glue these on now. When we come back, we can start working on the wheels. And here we have the beams glued on, and with that done we can now move on to building our wheels. And for this what we need to do is to create 4 wheels that have flanges and then 2 that don't. And well, these 2 that don't are actually going to go into the middle of the 6-wheel assembly here. It actually means the train's going to be able to go around corners. But for the ones with the flanges, what you need is your 25mm bases and also the flying stands, the 32mm ones. And what we're going to do is just glue it on top like that. So it's being glued on top of the curved surface you see just there. So it's going to go like that. Now to do this, it's definitely best to use some super glue because it sticks to that transparent plastic a little bit better than what plastic glue will do. And all we need is just a bit on that surface there, and a bit on the opposite side there. And then it's just a matter of putting these together. Now it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, but the closer to the middle you get, the better it will be. So there we go, we just want to glue it on kind of like that. So now I'm going to go and make 3 more of these and our wheels will then be built. I've finished building the wheels now. You can see them just here. I've got all 6, 4 of them with the flanges on, and then I've got 2 just here that don't. And this is kind of the orientation in which they're going to be glued on underneath. So these ones are going to be in the middle. Now with that done, we can start building the parts of which the wheels are going to glue to, then glue to the main chassis. And for that, what we need are some of these wall pieces. You're going to need 4 of these, and the minor details don't matter, like little control boxes and things. It is important though that they have 3 of these arch designs on it. So ones like this are perfect. Now they're going to be glued on upside down like that and inside out. And the reason for it is this cog mechanicum just here, they need to be glued upside down underneath the footplate. And of course the skull's now upside down, so it look a bit weird. So instead we're going to hide that on the inside and have all this cool detail showing on the outside. However, to glue it to the footplate, what we need is a flat surface, and you can see this kind of rectangle design that we've got going around there. What we want to do is to have it flat going across the top of it along there. So what you need to do is to remove this detail on the top to around about there, kind of like that you see. So to do this, I'm going to be using my modelling saw once again. You can use clippers if you're careful, but a saw's really easy to get a nice neat line with it. So what I'm going to do now is do that on 4 pieces like that, and when we come back, we'll show you how to start gluing these parts together. And there we are, the top's been removed and it's now in line with the top of that rectangle. And what we're going to do now is start gluing the wheels onto these. And you can see just here I've got set up roughly how it's going to go. You can see the wheels are going to go behind that archway there, and we're going to do 2 of them where it goes on the right hand side of these parts and 2 where it goes on the left hand side. Now to actually glue the wheel onto here, first of all there's one little thing we need to do, bearing in mind it's going to be going onto that part there. So if we take a look here, it's going to be going onto the back of just here. You can see there are some rivets on here, and to increase the surface area of the wheel to this part so it's a bit more secure, what we need to do is just take off those rivets. And to do that, it's very simple. You just need to get hold of a file and just very lightly remove them like that. It only takes a second, but it's definitely worth doing. There we go. So yes, the wheel is going to go onto this part just here. And of course there's no hard or fast area as to where exactly this is going to go. So to make it as consistent as possible, what you want to do is to hide that part behind the arch just there. And the point of that arch at the bottom there needs to go around about 2mm from the bottom of that base just there, you see. So you want to get it as consistent as possible and as central as possible like that. So what I'm going to do now is glue all these together, all 4 of these parts, using some super glue once again. And when we come back, we can glue these onto the rest of the chassis. And there we are, the wheel is now glued on, and I've done the same to the other 3 pieces as well. And with that done, we can now glue this onto the main part of the chassis. Now to do this, we want to take a quick look at this because we need to think about how the distance between the rails is going to be done. And the actual best way to do that with these kits is to use these 2 lines, because you can see this measurement between these 2 rows of hexes here is consistent across all these Mechanicus kits. You can see it's also going across there, that same distance. Flip it round, you can see these 2 bars are going along the same distance there. So it means you can actually use that as the measurement between your rails when you come to making track. So with that in mind, what we want to do is to glue the wheels on so they're going to be over those 2 rows. So if I grab my little wheel assembly just here, I don't want to be gluing the top of that bracket onto that part, instead just a bit past it, so that the black of the wheel is going to be directly over those hexes. In addition, I want to make sure that these are nicely in the middle here. So this bar that's at the end here, I want that to be in the middle of our frame. So you see it's going to be going roughly there like that. So what we need to do now is glue this on in that position and repeat the process with the other 3. And then when we come back, we can glue on the central wheels on these middle parts as well. Once those wheel assemblies are glued on, you'll start to have something that's really looking like something that's going to go on a railway. And if you're making a wagon, you could in fact just go to this stage and then decorate the top as you like. But as we're making a locomotive, I just want to add a little bit more to this, so that includes those extra wheels, the 5th and 6th ones. And these are going to go in the middle just here. So what we need to do is to glue them on, so the little nubbin on the base there is hidden behind that little bar just there like that. So we just want to do that on either side. And once we've done so, the wheels are complete. And here we have all 6 wheels now glued on. And the next thing to do is to look at these open spaces we've got at the front and at the back and just obscure them a little bit with some detail. For that, we can use some ladders, which will be perfect for the crew to climb onto the footplate. And for this, we're going to use one of the ladders from the Mechanicus kit. This is the one I'm going to use, and I've chosen this one specifically because the rungs are quite closed in, so it's going to help hide that open space. And what we need to do is to cut it into sections of 3 rungs. Now, there's enough on here that you can have 3, then cut through that one, then the next 3, cut through that one. And this way you'll end up with 4 pieces, which is exactly what we need. So we'll start out doing that now. So beginning at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, and then on this one, just double check before you cut. Then you just snip through like that, and then on the other side, snip through as well. And then what we need to do is to just trim it down a little bit to that bar that runs across there. So you can use the clippers for this. I just tend to start cutting in at the side like that, gradually working my way along. Just slowly bring it down to that bar until you get close to it, at which point you switch over to a file to file it smooth. So you just need to repeat this with all 4 pieces now. Once you've finished trimming down the little ladder segments, we're then ready to glue it to the rest of the chassis. And it's worth noting at this point, they are actually slightly different on either side. So you see here, those bars are rounded. On this side, however, they're much more square. So just bear that in mind when you're gluing them on to make sure they're the same way all the way around. Now, this is going to glue on into this little notch that we've got on the front here on the beam. So it's going to fit in there. But you can see the rivet at the bottom there is just stopping it from fitting snugly. So all we have to do before we glue it on is just remove one of those little rivets in the corner. So just there like that. And then it will fit snugly in here. So now it's just a matter of gluing all 4 of these in, once again using a little bit of super glue. Once those ladders have been glued on, the chassis is complete, and now I can start to make the detail at the top of it to actually create our locomotive. And for this, it's actually really simple, because a lot of this is done for us using this frame right here. This is the one you want to go for now, because actually these 2 parts here are perfect for the top of what will look like a kind of steam engine, a little industrial one. God knows what it actually runs on, probably not actually steam, but they're perfect for the right shape. So what we need for this right now is this part just here, and this one as well. Then we're going to need this one. And finally, we'll want this one too. Now, to start out with, we need the 2 main parts. So what I'm going to do now is cut these 2 bits out and glue them together. And when we come back, we'll start to put the finer details onto it. Once you've glued these 2 parts together, the next thing to do is to add the smaller details to it. And to begin with, what we want to do is put this door on the front just here. So glued on so it's at an angle like that. And then just this little part on here to create the chimney on top, just making sure that the vents are lined up with the rest of the body there. With those parts glued on, you can see we've now got the shape of the boiler, and this can be glued onto the chassis. And what we want to do is to put that central hole directly over this central square right here. So it'll glue in position like that. Just make sure it's lined up neatly so it's pointing straight forward. There we are, the locomotive is now really starting to take shape, but of course there is this massive gap just here and it looks a little bit strange. So what we need to do now is put some detail onto there. And to do this, we actually have a part that's perfect for it that we've used part of already. And that is this piece just here. Remember this from earlier on when we cut the tops off? Actually, these bottom parts here are absolutely perfect for what we need. And this particular one's very nice because there's some nice detail in there as well. So what we need to do is cut them off, and we're aiming to cut them just underneath where my thumb is, just there. That's about the right height. So you see you got those 2 bolts there, then it kind of arcs inward just at the top of that arc, so there. So what we want to do first of all is to cut that out, and then we can adjust it afterwards. And to cut it, I'm once again going to be using my saw. We're wanting to start around about there, so it's just a matter of gently cutting through both of these at this stage. I've finished cutting out those 2 supports, and now you can see where they're going to go. The idea is they just slot in just here, going up towards that chimney. But at the moment, there's a little bit too much on top there. They don't quite fit in there. So what I want to do now is gradually start filing away that top until they fit in there flush. So to do that, what you need to do is to get hold of your file and just gently start filing down on the top here and just checking every now and then to see if it's fitting yet or not. Now, once it does fit, the next thing to do is just smooth it out on this front side here, just so there's no pipes or anything like that just sticking up randomly. Once you've finished filing down the top and made it nice and neat, it's then just a matter of making sure it all fits nicely. And something to help out with that as well, that little bolt that we got just there, just smooth down the top of it a little bit so you can see it sits nice and flat in there like that. So we're now ready to glue that on, and to do it I'm just going to be using my super glue again. What I want to do is to put a little bit of the glue on top of that bolt there, and then some just there. There we go. And then we're ready to put this into position just there. So what we want to do, the two little prongs of the feet of this, those two parts there, we want to put them on either side of that bar we've got down there. So it's just a matter of just slotting into position and just adjusting it so that's fitted correctly there like that. And there we go. It's just a matter of repeating this on the other side. And there we are, that front is now nice and stable. The next thing to do is to put our control console onto the back just here. Now to do this, the part I'm going to be using is actually from this box, the Sector Imperialis Objectives box. I'm going to be using the little control console we've got just there. And well, I've got it cut out just here. You don't need the back of it, it's just this front part that we're using just here. So don't worry about the inside there. What this does is glues onto the back just here, directly straight to the back of that round part there. And it should just come out into line with this little beam that we've got down there. The console's now glued on, but you can see there's a bit of a gap still showing on the inside there. So to hide that, what we need is this part. There's actually another one just like it. This is again from the Objectives kit, and it's actually part of the little radio antenna. And what we're going to do is start out by gluing these in just here, which is going to be the beginning of hiding that gap. So I'm going to glue this one on this side and the other on the opposite side. I've glued on those two parts, you can see just there and just there, but there's still a little bit more of the gaps that we need to get rid of. So what we're going to do for the next stage of this is to grab a hold of another one of these wall pieces. I've gone for this one with a fan in the middle because what we want is just these two side parts here. We don't need to worry about the fan. There's a particularly good one for it as well because it's got a nice little control there which is appropriate for the cab. And to do this, we just need to cut away that fan so we just have the arch piece. So we're looking for that bit just there, and also that bit just there. So once again, to do this, we're going to be using the saw because it's quite thick plastic just here. What we need to do is to just get it close in position like that, and then start sawing through, and then we can use the file to neaten up afterwards. And here we go, the fan's been removed. I've also taken that clip off the bottom, and so now this can fit on nicely just here. So I'm going to glue this on both sides, and then we can move on to the next step. With that done, we're actually very nearly finished. The next thing to do is to think about putting some walls on the front and back of the locomotive. So I'm going to go for this slightly smaller one that's going to be glued onto the front just there. And also I'm going to go for this slightly larger, more armoured one to go onto the back just here, which is very convenient because it's got some nice controls on there. Looks like a way for the driver to control the engine whilst going backwards. And here it is, the locomotive is, well, pretty much built at this stage. You could of course add further details if you wanted to, and I'm sure you're going to have loads of ideas of adding things like lamps onto it, maybe cables, and you're going to have loads of bits left over from these kits, and also in your bits box as well. But really it doesn't end here, because of course that's the locomotive, and that's one of the more complicated parts of the rolling stock that you'd be making here. But to make wagons and things, it's really easy as well. I've got one that I made earlier here. This is a flatbed wagon, and you can see it's been built in pretty much the same way as the locomotive for the core of it. I've done the same amount of flooring just there, which is still clipped together underneath. The wheels are a little bit further apart just to give it a slightly different sort of silhouette underneath as what the locomotive's got. But the front and back, whilst they're different parts, more spares and leftovers, it's still the same thing, just cut down to the same sort of size and glued on there. And then these sides were just glued on as well. You could of course put things like cargo containers on top there, you could do a crane, you could put perhaps a tank on there, maybe you could get really imaginative about it and do an armoured wagon, a troop carrier, something like that. It really depends on what sort of feel that you want for the theme of your scenery. And of course after that you'll be wondering, how do you make tracks? And that is really easy. All you need to do is get hold of some sprue, and you can see I've got some just here, just trimmed down so it's nice and smooth. And these ones are actually from the same frame of those flooring pieces, and you get lots of long pieces on there. If you're doing any of these scenery kits, you'll get loads and loads of these parts, easily enough for the track that you want to make. For the width of them, you can see I've just used these little clips that would be holding the flooring together, because remember earlier on when I was talking about the locomotive and the distance between the wheels, we made sure to kind of follow those two lines of hexes going down there, which is actually the same width as these pegs, which means that as long as you just stick to that, the train will fit perfectly on the track. And there you go, and it'll be nice and secure. So it's super simple to do. And well, we hope this has given you some inspiration, because you see it's dead simple to do it. And what I'm going to do now is start adding some more detail to this locomotive, and well, then we'll show you the finished result. And here we have the completed locomotive, ready to be undercoated and painted. So as you've seen, building this miniature is actually very straightforward to do, but the important thing to do is to make sure you get hold of a razor saw, because you will need it to cut some of the larger, chunkier parts of scenery to make the smaller parts that we have on the model. Also, by following the method that we've done here, you can see it's very simple to make any kind of rolling stock that you want, and really the sky's the limit when it comes to using your imagination here. So really hope it's inspired you and that you have fun making some models like this of your own, and we'll see you all again very soon.